What's up, everybody? How you guys doing today? So, just wanted to go over something real quick. Not my usual fabrication stuff, but some interesting stuff I ran into with a Jeep that I'm working on today. So here's a 97 Jeep Wrangler. Now, it came in with the customer complaining about a misfire. When it got here, ran a couple quick tests on it, found that, the ignition system was pretty well toast. So we replaced a bunch of that stuff because it needed it anyhow. And then proceeded to run a compression test on it. Now, cylinders 1 and 2 are at 160 psi. Cylinder 3 was at 0 psi. 4, 5, and 6 were excellent as well, right around 155, 160. So in doing that, we now have 0 compression in cylinder 3. Now, one of the things you want to do on a test with that with 0 compression, it turns into an interesting problem, because usually when you have low compression in a cylinder, it usually means either your valve seats are burnt a little bit, valve's not seating properly, or your rings are worn, or something's going on with the head gasket or something of that nature. But you will always have low compression, not no compression whatsoever. So here's where it gets even more interesting. Performed a leak down test on the vehicle. The reason you do a leak down test is to see, is the compression leaking past the exhaust valve? Is it leaking past the intake valve? Or is it leaking into the cooling system? Which can happen if you blow a head gasket. You can actually get cylinder to cylinder leakage. You can get cylinder to cooling system leakage. Or if you've got a burnt valve that's burnt severely enough it's not sealing, you'll get leakage into the intake system or the exhaust system. So, while performing the leak down test, everything's sealed up. Sealed right back up, it passed the leak down test. No leakage into the cooling system, no cylinder to cylinder, nothing out the exhaust, nothing out the intake. So, what was the problem? We did another compression test after the leak down and we ended up with 60 psi of compression. Then we fired the vehicle up and had 0 compression in that cylinder again after running, still had the misfire, everything else. Well, what to look for in a situation like that is basically this. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but that right there is the number 3 intake valve. Or exhaust valve. It's actually the exhaust valve. So basically what happened was it broke a spring, broke a valve spring. When I did the leak down test, it pushed the valve back up into its seat because I pressurized the cylinder. That's why I passed the test. Then obviously when I started it again, the valve dropped, the spring dropped and didn't return the valve, so we were back to a 0 compression situation again. These are the things that can get very, very interesting. Now, we were able to find this pretty quick utilizing the compression test, the leak down test, and everything else. So those are things that are very, very important. And, basically all you need to do is buy yourself a cheap kit, something like this. This kit runs about 180, 190 bucks. Comes with everything you need to do a full compression test. I don't have my leak down tester out right now, but you get the idea. So basically, you do those 2 tests, you find out that the thing is actually working right, pull the valve cover, check to make sure all the valve springs are good. Obviously, one is broken, so we have a broken valve spring that is causing the valve to drop and not return fully to its seat. So, big shout out to my buddy Martin over at Accurate Machine in Middletown, Connecticut, for getting me a spring. He managed to have one. Now, I'm going to explain a couple things here so you guys don't rip me apart in the comments. Normally, when you break one valve spring, you're supposed to replace every one of them. And it's probably a good idea to replace the spring retainers as well as the clips that go along with it, and the keepers. Replace all of it. And while you're at it, if you've got it torn down that far, you should probably pull the head and have the head done as well. But in the essence of time, because he needs this thing for Thanksgiving, and the essence of cost and expense, because it is near the holidays and he wasn't expecting this big of a repair, we're going to put one single spring in this thing, which normally I wouldn't do. But in this case, we're going to knock it out. It's a Jeep. These things are tough. It'll love it. So I'm going to try to set you guys up as best I can so that you can see this. We'll get this spring replaced, and we'll go from there. So what we're going to do here basically right now is we're going to remove the exhaust and the intake rockers, and then through this port here we're going to add some compressed air. The compressed air will actually push both valves up and hold them there while I pull the valve spring off of that exhaust valve and replace it. And we've got this cylinder on top dead center at the compression stroke, just an FYI. And one thing we're going to check too is we're going to pull this push rod out and just make sure that it's not bent. Sometimes these will bend and cause the rocker to overextend, which will break the spring, but this one actually looks pretty good. Check the other one as well. Yeah, that one is good as well. Alright, so now this is the one with the broken spring. I don't know how well you can see that, but it is moving around in there, whereas this one doesn't move at all. So we're going to line this with paper towels so that we don't lose these keepers down in the cylinder head, which would be super unfortunate. And then we're going to put some air to this cylinder and try to get this valve spring out. Alright, we're going to put some air to it and see if that valve comes up. Alright, so the valve came up, which is awesome. There we got one keeper. Don't lose these. There's the other keeper. And the retainer. Retainer actually looks good. And now the broken valve spring. One piece, two piece. Broken. Alrighty, now we'll put the new one back in. Here's the new spring. The retainer. Now here's where it's going to get interesting. I don't have a tool to actually do these while they're still on the vehicle, so we're going to have to make something up that'll ultimately tie into that bolt right there, and then we'll try to get this back together. Alright, so I didn't film actually putting the keepers back in because it was quite janky and a little crazy, and I was in front of the camera so you couldn't see it anyway. But got the keepers back in, new valve spring is in. So now we're going to pop that push rod back in. put the rockers back on. And you want to make sure those are seated in the actual lifter, and you can feel it go into the lifter. You see a little pop there, it goes into the lifter. Put that back on. We'll put the rockers back on. And once we get these tightened back down again, we'll do another compression test to see where we're at. And hopefully we have compression. And yes, sometimes when you take these out, it does bend this little retainer in the middle. You just have to kind of tweak it back and get it centered on the valve and you're good. Tighten everything down and it'll stay. And yes, I'm going to torque those. I just want to get a quick compression test out of it. Make sure that we're good before we put everything back together and torque down right. Alright, so hopefully you can see that gauge. Let's crank it over and see if we get any compression. Nothing at the moment. So, what is the issue? Did the valve hit the piston? Is the valve bent? I guess we'll find out. So the cylinder was so washed down from having that drop valve that it was actually making zero compression. We had to oil it up a little bit. We finally got some compression in it. Valve cover's not quite bolted on yet, but we're going to give it a start and we're going to see how it actually runs now. Purrs like a kitten. No more big misfire. No more funny smells. No more jumping around. So I think we actually fixed this one. So we're going to bolt the valve cover back on, get everything good, go take it for a test drive and see how she goes. Alright guys, so that's pretty much it for the Jeep project. Everything is all back together now. It's complete, it runs, it drives great. Feels way better than it did when it came in here. So we'll add another fixed one down to the books. Definitely an interesting one. That's the stuff I love doing when you actually have to use your brain to figure stuff out. It makes things so much nicer to work on, because then at least you feel somewhat challenged. Alright guys, thanks for watching the video. Have a wonderful day. Stay tuned for more content. We got some interesting stuff coming in the future, so stay right wherever you are, stay there. And I will talk to you guys later. Thanks again for watching. Hit that like button. Subscribe to me if you're not subscribed. I definitely appreciate it 100%. Have an awesome Thanksgiving, and I will see you guys probably this weekend.